Chapter 14. The Castle Captive. "I shouldn't have left Nancy alone," Ned declared, blaming himself for her disappearance. "Let's talk about this sensibly," said George. The group discussed the situation for several minutes and concluded that Nancy could not have left the castle. "Since she didn't go upstairs," said George, "that leaves only one place she could be. The cellar." "But why didn't I see her?" Ned argued. "I suggest you girls wait here. Bert and Dave and I will go downstairs with a flashlight and see what we can find." Ned tried to keep his voice calm, but the others knew he was greatly upset. He led the way, and presently the boys vanished into the darkness of the castle basement. Bess and George stood at the top of the stairway, looking up and down the long corridor and hoping Nancy would reappear. George strode back and forth nervously. Bess was dabbing her tear-filled eyes with a handkerchief. Finally, George said, "I can't stand this any longer. The boys should have been back by this time. Maybe something has happened to them, too." She started down the cellar stairway. Bess went after her and grabbed her arm. "If we all get captured, who's going to go for help?" she asked. "You're right," George agreed. "But what in the world happened to Nancy? It seems as if she just vanished into thin air." Bess gave a tremendous sigh. "That moonstone somebody sent her certainly didn't help Nancy. I'd say it brought her bad luck." As Bess stopped speaking, both girls heard a startled mutter. It seemed to be coming out of the wall. The cousins huddled together. Who had made the sound? The two girls gazed at the paneled beams beside them. Was it possible someone was hidden behind the wooden wall? George decided someone was there. Could the person be Nancy, trapped, injured, or a prisoner? Was someone with her, keeping the young sleuth from crying out? The girls must find the answer. Motioning with her hands, George indicated a plan to Bess, who nodded. George would go down to the cellar, try to find the boys, and get them to help break down the wall. Although Bess was fearful of being left alone, she consented. Her heart was pounding like a trip hammer. On tiptoe, George went down the rest of the flight. When her eyes became accustomed to the dimness, she started walking ahead. To her relief, she saw the three boys coming back. They had not been harmed. Bert said in a scolding tone, "It's dangerous down here. Why didn't you stay upstairs?" George paid no attention to the question, but quickly whispered what she and Bess had heard. "I suggest we tiptoe back up and you boys examine the wall where the muttering came from. There's something creepy going on there." Cautiously, the four ascended the steps. Ned beamed his flashlight over the paneled wall. Suddenly, he pointed to the well-concealed latch of a two-paneled door. He motioned for Bess and George to go to the top of the stairway. As he held the flashlight on the door, Bert and Dave silently moved the latch and yanked the door open. Out tumbled Nancy. She fell limply into Ned's arms. For a few seconds, all eyes were on Nancy. Then Bert looked again at the door from which Nancy had emerged. A closet-type room was revealed. In it stood a bewhiskered man, stunned by the sudden turn of events and unable to escape from his captors. "Just who are you?" Bert cried, grabbing the man's arm. As he yanked him from the closet, both of them lost their balance and went rolling down the stairway. Dave went flying after the tumbling figures. Bess and George could hear a scuffle going on below. Meanwhile, Ned had picked Nancy up and now carried her outdoors. The fresh air quickly revived her. "Oh, Nancy," said Bess, coming outside. "What happened?" Between long breaths of air, Nancy explained that as she was descending the cellar stairway, Suddenly the secret door had burst open, startling her. The bewhiskered man had grabbed her and held a vial under her nose. The fumes from the vial had made her dizzy, and she was unable to flee. Then he yanked me into the closet and closed the door. "Oh, you poor thing," said Bess. Presently, Bert and Dave arrived with their captive. He glowered at the young people. "Now tell your story," Ned ordered him. The prisoner only glared. They asked him his name, but he refused to give it. He would not say whether or not he was living at the castle. Ned put his hand into the man's pocket and brought out a vial. He read the label and gave a sigh of relief. "This stuff is perfectly harmless," he said. "It'll just make a person sleepy." Turning to the prisoner, he asked, "Are you in the habit of carrying this with you?" "A guy's got a right to some protection," the man grumbled. Then he ignored further questions put to him as to why he was living there. Nancy, who now felt quite like herself, said, "I'm rather glad this man abducted me. Otherwise, we wouldn't have any excuse for taking him to the police." "Police?" the man shrieked. "You ain't gonna take me to the police. I ain't done nothing. This girl was too snoopy. I had to keep her quiet." This time he was ignored by the young people. Bert and Dave offered to drive the prisoner to town and turn him over to the authorities, then come back for the others. "Fine," said Nancy. "I'd like to investigate that tower." "No, no, you mustn't do that," the prisoner cried out. "You can't go up there." "Why not?" Nancy asked. "It's dangerous. You'll get into trouble," the man replied. "Come on," Bert urged the man. He and Dave took their captive by his arms and hurried him toward Ned's car. "Oh, here are the keys," said Ned, running forward to hand them to Dave. When he returned, Ned asked Nancy if she really felt well enough to make the ascent to the turret. She insisted that she did, so Ned and the three girls returned to the castle and climbed to the second floor. "I hope we don't meet those bats again," said Bess fearfully. "If this turret is their home, they may come back before we leave." "We'll have to take that chance," George told her. Bess said no more. The door to the tower was still open, and the young people climbed the stairs. Above was a stone-walled circular room. It contained a bed, a small kerosene stove, a table, and a chair. "That old man has been living here all right," Ned remarked. Nancy had been casting her eyes around, looking for an opening to the roof of the turret. On one wall, in a corner, was an iron ladder. Above it, she could discern a trap door. Nancy pointed it out to the others, and Ned started up the ladder. "Nothing out here but a space to stand on," he called down. "Any clues?" Nancy asked. Ned looked around and reported that he could find nothing. As he ascended, Nancy began a search of the room. Under the cot, she saw a piece of paper and reached down to pick it up. On it were typed the words, "Our password will be Moonstone Valley." When the others saw it, Bess gave a start. "Moonstone Valley again!" she exclaimed. "Nancy, that man wasn't fooling when he told you it was dangerous to come up here. This must be the hideout of some gang." "You're right," George added. "And they know the old name for this area." Nancy was thoughtful. Now she was sure that the castle, the bewhiskered man, the moonstone she had received, and some nefarious gang were all connected somehow. But who were the gang members? Mr. Seaman and friends of his? She and the others searched the room thoroughly, but could find no other clue. In the distance, they heard a car and assumed the boys were returning. "Let's go," Bess said nervously. The group trudged back to the drawbridge, where Bert and Dave met them. The boys reported that the prisoner was behind bars. "The chief wants to talk to you, Nancy, after lunch," said Bert. At the mention of the word lunch, the young people realized how hungry they were. George, who at once suggested the brass kettle, told Bert and Dave that she would introduce them to a gossipy but nice old lady. At first, the girls' escorts frowned, but when they heard that Mrs. Hemstead had really helped in advancing the solution of the mystery, the boys relented. To the girls' amazement, the elderly woman was not in her usual place. The rocking chair was empty, and Mrs. Hemstead's daughter said that her mother was not feeling well and had remained in her room. Nancy expressed her sympathy and led the way into the tea room. As soon as luncheon was over, the 6 friends walked to the police station. Chief Burke asked Nancy to prefer charges against her assailant. "He still won't give his name, and he has no money on him," the official said. Nancy consented and signed the prescribed form. "Oh, dear," said Bess. "I wish it hadn't been necessary for you to do that. I'm sure now the Moonstone Valley gang will be after you." Chief Burke's eyebrows lifted. "Moonstone Valley gang?" he repeated. "That's one gang I haven't heard of. What do you know about them?" Nancy produced the typed slip which she had found in the prisoner's bedroom. The officer was amazed and requested that she leave the paper with him. "This calls for a police investigation," he declared. "But I'm glad you sightseers learned about this fellow." "When you searched the prisoner," the young sleuth said, "did you find anything of special interest on him?" Chief Burke opened a drawer in his desk and pulled out a dirty piece of white paper. "Only this," he said. "It might be a clue to something, but it doesn't make sense to me." "What does it say?" Nancy inquired. The officer handed the paper to her. The instant Nancy saw the 2 words, she was sure this was a code signal. It read, "Wolf's Eye." End of chapter 14.